Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Welcome, everybody, to our first Friday Big Blend Radio Toast to the Arts and Parks show, where we get to chat with artists who are residents in national park units across the country. This is all done through the National Parks Arts Foundation. It really is a super cool program. You can check out their website, nationalparksartsfoundation.org. And this is a program that's open to anybody in the creative spirit, whether it's textile arts like our guest that's joining us today, Nancy Hershberger, she'll be joining us, whether it's textiles like what she's doing, if you're a painter, plein air painter, a potter, ceramicist, a dancer, a musician, a writer, a poet, whatever you do, filmmaking, photography, this is a program that is open up to you, and you can apply to stay for a full month in a national park unit, places like Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, Fort Union National Monument, which is what we're going to talk about today. There's Dry Tortugas out in the Florida Keys, your own island out there. I mean, it's really pretty awesome. So, again, the website is nationalparksartsfoundation.org. And today we're welcoming Nancy Hershberger. She is actually at Fort Union right now in northern New Mexico. Nancy and I had the pleasure of finally visiting earlier this spring and meeting with Lorenzo, who's been on our show. He's a superintendent. And finally meeting him in person and finally getting to see these incredible ruins of this very historic and really important fort that when you think about the Southwest history, this is an icon and was a major supply depot. It was also part of the Santa Fe National Historic Trail, so a lot of history there. But first, welcome, Nancy. How are you?
Hi, thanks for having me. I am just fine, thank you.
I love this because right now Nancy and I are in northeast Pennsylvania, and you live in south central Pennsylvania. We're in the rural backwoods area of Pennsylvania, and you're in, the desert southwest, which is where we're from. We're actually from Tucson area, or I should say we were based out there, until we were on the road full time. So it's kind of an interesting contrast being in the desert southwest versus rural Pennsylvania. Did you go through a little bit of landscape shock and a little bit of a cultural shock too?
Well, what was most surprising, because we drove out here, my husband and I drove out, and then as soon as we got to New Mexico, he got on a plane and went back home. So I've been here by myself at the park. But getting back to the question, was it the biggest surprise was the fact that I didn't realize it was going to be uphill the whole way. It's where we live in Pennsylvania, we're at 1,300 feet or so, something around there. But this park is almost 7,000 feet. It's the high plains. It's beautiful countryside. So it wasn't until we started driving through, from Texas to here in New Mexico to Santa Fe, where it really opened up, and it was just wide open spaces and so completely different from where I live in Pennsylvania. At home in PA, this time of year, we have gray, overcast skies from now until April. Occasionally we have a beautiful, crystal blue sky, but it doesn't happen often. Here you have that every single day, and oh my, that is so nice. And the low humidity, that was a pleasant surprise, where it's 10 degrees different standing in the sun and standing in the shade. It's just completely different, and it's beautiful, and I really am reluctant to leave. It is, I really like it here. Really,
I loved
you.
going on your Facebook page today, and everyone, you can go to Nancy-Hershberger, and that's let me. She's from Pennsylvania, and there's Hershey's around the corner. In fact, we even had Hershey's chocolate today, but it's Hershberger, Nancy Hershberger Artist on Facebook, so you can see her work and her photos from the residency. And you're talking about how there's blue sky, and yes, right now, let me tell you, it's cold up here in Pennsylvania, and you do have one of your iconic gray skies happening, and it's cold. That's all I'm going to say. It's cold. It's different. It's a different cold that it's just different than the dry cold. I can't really explain it other than it gets in your bones here a little differently. So we're just like, okay, but the fall colors here are absolutely incredible. I think where you are is so beautiful too. Those big open skies, the blue skies, the wind, because it's known as Fort Windy where you are. But the wildlife too is different, a little bit different. I know you have the elk up here too, but you've got pronghorn out there, and they are so cool. It's so beautiful to see them up in the plains. Do you get to see them every day?
Every single day, yes. Yes, they hang out around the park as much as, visitors. I got a little bit of a video of them moving. I was walking the park the other day, and, just on the far side of the park where the adobe ruins stop, the pronghorns were just outside the, those adobe ruins. And I don't know if they saw me or heard me, or because I was kind of by myself back there, and they started moving. They calmly, they weren't running. They just started moving out of the way, and I took a little bit of a video, like 10 seconds or so, and I put it up on my Facebook page, and it was the coolest thing because, first of all, I've never seen them before. I didn't know about them until I showed up here, and what's that? There's a pronghorn.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. They're deer, but not really.
They're antelope.
Antelope.
Yeah.
And so that was another surprise that I didn't know about. And just being out here in the wide open space really makes you feel different. You feel a whole lot smaller.
There is, and I think the fort is really interesting too because it's got it's changed over the years, its needs, and just makes you kind of realize what life was like back then, and you go all the way through to the Native American heritage there, all the way till now. This still, I don't know, it's really iconic when you think about what these forts did. They were like their own little cities. I mean, they even have a little prison. They had like a little mercantile. They had, it's just everything is there, So it's kind of
And that's right. And the hospital. And to read about each area of the park. And this park is laid out, it's laid out the way the fort was laid out. And the way they put the, those information panels in front of each stop tells you everything about what happened in each area. And it's really fascinating. It's really fascinating to read through it as you go through. But one of the things I realized once I got here is that I had no idea. I really was pretty clueless, even though I did some reading about the park. It was not enough. There is this place, this, fort. There's so much history here to the fort itself, plus what happened before it. What I found interesting were the parallels. The people who were here first, the 24 tribes of Native Americans who were basically displaced when when the fort was built, used this area as for the resources. Now, a lot of people that I have talked to from home that say, look at my pictures, and they said, oh, the area looks so desolate. It's really not. It's an area that was rich in resources that the Native American people used as they moved through the area. They didn't necessarily stay here very long. They moved through it. And so the hunting was, abundant. The plants, the rivers or creeks or whatever you call them here, there was water. There was, there were plants. There was abundant wildlife hunting. And so they used it in such a way that it remained that way. But when the fort was constructed, it was also used to be a place that you moved through. It was a stopping point, and people who moved through here gathered their supplies and kept going. So, I don't know, I just thought that was an interesting point.
Because it's so huge in regards to it's like a hub for nomads. When you think about the tribes, how they moved with the season, just like wildlife. Certain times of the year, elk will come down. They should be hanging out near you soon. The elk, I think they're there pretty much year round, but we didn't get to see them. Which Nancy and I want to go back just for the elk, and because there's trails out there that you can go hiking and go walking on, and the bird watching there is also very prolific. But I think it's part of the migratory bird route. So you're thinking about the birds that stop by, the Santa Fe Trail, which was originally the trails from the Indians, and then here comes the Spanish. So you've got the Spanish coming in. You've got, here's all the soldiers coming in, the American soldiers. And so it's a multicultural hub, but everyone was passing through, not necessarily there forever, except for Lorenzo. Right. His family's connected back to the fort. So, we've been interviewing him for years. So, but it's very fascinating to me that, global cultural diversity that is there. It's like Santa Fe is so diverse as well, and, especially with the Spanish coming in, and not all the history is, that nice, but it's important that we learn it. And I think that's what's so cool about this program, and I know you've done other national park residencies. You've been in Manassas National Battlefield, Great Smoky Mountains, which we just came through. We were just there not even a few weeks ago. Shenandoah National Park, Stones River National Battlefield. So you've done a lot of battlefields. You've done the natural aspect, and I think that's what's so cool. Is when you go to these historic sites, there's also this nature presence. But just, going there and being able to breathe with your art, like not have to, I'm there for 3 days, take a gazillion pictures, and then create. But you can actually be there in that space and kind of live with the history and the nature, kind of feel what was, I think those kind of places are so important historically. When we go through and we walk through the fort, you can imagine the people there. You can, you're walking where they walked. It's ancient. So to be able to create and have a month, that's got to be a huge difference than going to a park for a few days and then creating from there.
It is, and you're absolutely right. There is, it's night and day. Once you step foot onto the park, knowing that you have 4 weeks to immerse yourself in the history of the area and find, the picture that resonates, the photograph, the image that resonates with you enough to inspire you to go to work. And I was able to produce like I've never been able to produce artwork before at any other park, and I don't know why. I don't know maybe it was the 4 weeks that I have here. Just that extra week made all the difference. I started on the very first week I was here. Usually when I come to a park, the first day or two is about settling in, getting your groceries, and then just setting up your household, and then you go out and you start snapping pictures like crazy and begin work. Well, here I was able to begin work on like day 3.
Oh,
and
nice.
So I was, a quilt. What I do is I make art quilts. So my art quilts look like paintings, and they are they're a little bigger than your average painting. The first one I made while I was here is, when I've done all the hand work, the finished work to it, it will be approximately 40 inches by 50 inches tall. The second one it's going to be about 24 by 36. This one will be about 30 by 40. This one that I'm looking at, that of course you can't see, is the one I'm working on now. I'm quilting now, but my work takes time. And so I start with an image, a photograph, and I enlarge the photograph. So I bring everything with me. I bring my computer so that I can take my photograph from my camera to my computer. I bring my printer because to print it out myself, enlarge it, print it out myself, and then I start work. So an art quilt is just like any other quilt. There's 3 layers: the top, the batting, and the backing, and then it's stitched together. And I use a sewing machine. I don't hand quilt anything. I use a sewing machine to quilt it. So I have some serious equipment that I bring with me. And when
You're not flying,
when I make
then. This is why you drive.
No, I've got to drive everywhere because I'm bringing a sewing machine. I'm bringing an iron. I'm bringing my computer. I have to have power.
Yeah.
And so, there's that. But there's nothing like it if I, have all my stuff here and I can start creating. I just set up a studio here in the artist quarters. And so anyway, so you've got the 3 layers. The top is of course, the most important. That's your image. And I like to fuse fabrics instead of piecing. That piecing means stitching one piece to another. And that is how you make a traditional pieced bed quilt, by sewing different pieces of fabric together. That's called patchwork. And you make recognizable what we call blocks. They're squares that are, different colors and pieces. Well, that's all well and good. But what I do is more like painting with fabric. I use large blocks of pieces of fabric and tiny little pieces of fabric that are fused. So that means I put a certain type of glue that's made for fabric. It comes in a long roll. I mean, you just put it down on the fabric and you iron it on. And so you have this glue on the back of your fabric, and I like to fuse these fabrics together with a hot iron. You're just basically melting the glue on the back of the fabric to adhere to the piece, behind it. And so you're building up in layers, and it ends up kind of looking like a painting. I do add paint and ink, but not that much. It's just for, little subtle highlights here and there.
Oh, wow.
But
so
my quilts are fabric.
I was going to say that the texture of what you're doing is really incredible, because looking at it, it is like a painting, and I'm going, okay, what is going, like, I want to physically see your art, because it's fascinating to me of how you've been doing that layer, because you have such texture, and looking at what you've done for Union. And some of the pieces I've seen, you've got somewhere, the water, how you've captured the light in the water was just incredible. I'm like, no way, this is, I didn't even realize they were quilts until, like, I started really reading what was going on. And I was like, no way, I was like, she's an amazing painter, and such texture, and how you get the light in there. And I'm always so big about light being right, and it's just incredible. So, yeah, I mean, for you to be fusing fabric So are you getting, so you're doing some painting on there, but are you getting different colors of fabric, or are you changing, I mean, how does that part work with the fabric versus the painting part of it?
Well, because I do landscapes, there's always some amount of sky in everything, in every landscape I do. Mm-hmm. And getting the right fabric for a crystal blue sky like you have here is really tricky. It's almost impossible. So in that case, I make my own fabric. So I buy what's called PFD fabric, prepared for dye. And so that's just a simple white fabric with no sizing or nothing. So it's prepared to hold a paint or a dye or an ink very easily. And so for this park, to create the blue, to try to recreate the crystal blue skies, I brought my white PFD fabric, and I brought a specific type of acrylic paints that are made for fabric. And if I can tell you the brand name, if I'm not allowed to say it, I won't. But if I can tell you, it's okay.
Yeah, we don't care.
So there is a brand by Artistic Artifacts. It's a shop in Alexandria, Virginia, and the owner, Judy Gula, worked with a paint company that manufactures for, fabrics, and she worked with them to create her own line of paints for fabric, and it's called Artistic Artifacts fabric paints. And so I started buying those a few years ago, and they're really awesome. And the one thing that we, as fiber artists, art quilters, have to be careful of is when you apply an acrylic paint to canvas, it's one thing. But if you are applying an acrylic to a fabric that you are going to punch holes in with a needle, you need a paint that is not going to change that fabric, that is not going to lay on the surface. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With Judy's paints, she worked really, really hard to create these paints so that it doesn't change the hand of the fabric, so that you can stitch through it later. And so with the help of the neighborhood kitty cat that showed up here at my door, I was outside painting fabric, painting these, blue fabrics here. And painting blue on this PFD fabric, let's be specific. And worked like a charm. It worked like a charm. And so you'll see some of this fabric in the 3 quilts that I've produced so far from this park. Yeah. Okay, so that's one part. So the rest is I'm usually using commercial batiks or commercial prints, or sometimes I use my own hand dyes or hand painted fabrics like the sky fabric. And I just fuse them down, and then it depends. I will need to add some highlights or some shadow, and for that I like to use inks, and sometimes use oil paints that are made specifically for fabric, and those are called Shiva oil paint sticks. And I learned how to use them a few years ago, and they totally rock, because those paints, while they take a lot longer to dry than acrylics, those paints do not change the hand of the fabric at all. So you can, you can do anything you want. You can make this look like a painting, and it's tactile. You can, reach out and touch it, because then you're going to stitch it later. And then you have a whole other part of the process, a whole other dimension. You can create texture with thread. You can add it's very simple. You can white out or darken an area of your quilt just using thread. It's the coolest thing in the world.
This is neat. I don't think I've ever talked to an artist who's doing this kind of intense, art quilt, style. There's quilting, like you're saying, the patchwork, which is really cool and fascinating, and there's so many behind the designs and the symbols, and, it's like in certain areas there's barn quilt tours, like you go and there's barns with different family, almost like family, it's like clans, how Scottish clans have their thingy, I don't know what the word is, insignia, I don't know, their thing. That's like our symbol for our family, and so it's really neat. But what you're doing is taking it to a whole other level, and it seems to me from the way you're talking and from your art that the sky's the limit for you in creativity. Going from patchwork to, full-on art quilt, that had to be kind of liberating and go, woohoo, the sky is the limit, let's go for it.
It was, thank you. Yes, it was, because that is how I started out, making bed quilts and making pieced quilts. And, first you have to learn how to sew, because I didn't grow up with, using a sewing machine. I didn't grow up, hand quilting anything or even sewing anything. No, I grew up on a dairy farm. We had to milk cows every day. And so there wasn't really much time to do, more than that. But it wasn't until very, very late in life not that late, but 14 years ago, when my friend Sue Ann said, Nancy, you and I are going to take a quilting class. And I was like, what? Quilting class? Sue Ann, I don't own a sewing machine. I don't know how to sew. She knew how to sew. And, she dragged me into this class kicking and screaming. And I ended up buying a sewing machine and all the stuff that you needed for that class. And it's actually a lot of fun. And I was hooked. So I just started making, these very simple pieced quilts. And then I moved on to something a little more, challenging. And then one day it was like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of this. Let's find something else. And a friend told me about this art quilt class. It was called Quilt Journey. And the teacher's name is Cindy Zakis. And she teaches at Artistic Artifacts in Alexandria, Virginia. And this class was just amazing. Cindy, by the way, also teaches at the big quilt show, the annual quilt show in Houston, Texas, International Quilt Festival. And so she's an amazing teacher. And this class called Quilt Journey, is ongoing. So from 2014 to now, we still meet. Now we meet on Zoom, but we're still, she's still taking us through this journey. And this is where I learned, the everything about, composition and colors and values and some other classes here and there, but mostly it was through study with Cindy that I really learned, and it took off from there. And she's become a mentor as well as a friend. And so I owe her a world of gratitude for.
Your journey is pretty amazing. If you look at your journey, I mean, look how many national park units that you've been a resident in, and then your quilts are, in exhibits around the world, in England, across this country. What I wanted to know is there's such diversity to what you're doing and the crafting of it, the art part of it. Would people ever would you ever look at it as fashion, like making a quilt like what you're doing that someone would wear for like the Grammys or something, like a really big event, like wearing an art, because fashion is art too, because I think when people think
true.
quilts, they always think about quilts that are for a bed, but quilts could be hanging on the wall. There's all these different things you can do with them. To me, it'd be kind of interesting to see someone wear one.
There are people who do make quilts to turn them into garments, and that they have two different skill sets there. Garment construction is completely different from quilting. Quilting is everything is flat. When you're doing a garment, you are making something that is three-dimensional. It has to move. And so your seam construction is different. How you use fabrics on the bias as opposed to straight grain, which we tend to do in quilting. It's a different skill set. It's one that I don't have. I just have this one, and I'm perfectly content to make quilts that hang on the wall to be displayed in a home or in a museum or anywhere. The garment construction. Wow. Yeah, there are people that have that skill set, and I am humbled. I grovel at their feet. They don't have that. I don't have that skill.
Well, I think what you're doing is beautiful and tells a story, and I love that it's got so much, that it's multimedia. I think that's really wonderful with what you're doing because it just has so much texture, just even looking from photographs, you can see. And I encourage everyone, again, Nancy's, go to her Facebook page. It's Nancy Hershberger, and that is H-E-R-S. Okay, wait, I got to, you spell it out for everybody so we can get it straight. I want to make sure. My brain goes to Hershey's chocolate because we're right here in Pennsylvania.
You got it. You got it right. It's fine. It's Nancy Hershberger Artist, and my last name is spelled Hershberger, just like it sounds, Hershberger.
That's right.
And, I'm on Facebook.
Yeah, so check it out because you can see, photos from the residency. You can see Fort Union. I do want to ask, would you do another residency? Would you apply for another one? I mean, look at how many you have done, but through the National Parks Arts Foundation, I think they've got such unique places. Our parks really are unique.
Yes.
But would you do Chaco Canyon, or would you, apply for Hawaii, one of the Hawaii ones?
Absolutely. So thank you for mentioning that. I do want to thank the National Parks Arts Foundation and the people here at Fort Union for believing in me and liking my stuff and to invite me to be here. I, absolutely would and am working on applications for next year through the National Parks Arts Foundation. They have the coolest ones I've seen. They have the coolest parks. Dry tortugas? Hello.
Yeah. I know.
Oh, my gosh.
Ooh, that would be so cool. That would be completely different.
Because that's, yes, you're right. Absolutely. Completely different. And you're, on your own on an island. And, yeah.
Ooh.
It's, from the photographs I've looked at so far, it's just incredible. And that very long answer to a very short question is yes.
I would love to see you in Dry Tortugas. Dry Tortugas, I would love to see what you would do with the stars, and palm trees and the lighthouse. And I think there's the turtles, that there's so much, all the bird life and just that water, I'm ready for Florida now. I love your state. It's beautiful. Pennsylvania really is beautiful. The fall colors, we've been here now in fall and we've done summer. So we've done 2 seasons in Pennsylvania over the last couple of years. And it really is a beautiful state. However, Florida right now, this time of year, sounds really good to me. I'm just saying.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
It does. It does sound like a good plan.
It makes you appreciate different parts of the country.
Yeah. But Pennsylvania really, I remember last year around this time we left where we are now in the Northeast and went down through the Poconos and went up to the top of that mountain and went, what are we doing? It's 19 degrees outside. We thought we could have a picnic lunch until we got out of the car. What were we thinking? We're from the desert Southwest, and it does get cold in the desert, trust me. But this is a whole other level that you guys have up here. But, the nature, the deer are everywhere in the gardens, and it just is exquisite. So, but all I'm saying is this Dry Tortuga is an island in the Florida Keys right now. A little warm, some tropics. That sounds really good right now to me. But thank you for joining us here on the show. It's been such a pleasure and so interesting to learn about your work and the actual process, or I should say the many processes you go through to create the beauty that you do. Incredible. So everyone, again, keep up with Nancy on her Facebook page. Also, you can go to nps.gov/FOUN. To learn more about Fort Union National Monument. And if you're an artist or you want to support the arts, you can go to nationalparksartsfoundation.org and learn more about their residency programs. Or, like I said, if you support the arts, you may want to support them. It's that giving season, just saying. So you can support the nonprofits that do this amazing work. So thank you so much. And everyone, keep up with us at bigblendradio.com. Every first Friday, we talk to artists and we talk about art in parks. So thanks so much. You take care, Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.